Welcome. Thanks for joining the editorial board. Please introduce yourself, tell us the post you're running for, and give us some of your background.
I am Miguel Fernandez III, or MC Fernandez, or Mike to my friends. I am running for Circuit Judge. It is Group 18. It is the position being vacated by Judge Franklin Baker, who is the Circuit Judge for that position here in Naples. The reasons that I'm running is obviously I want to continue in public excellence, what I call public service excellence. So I think it's not just enough that people engage or want to aspire to positions of public service, but rather that they do it, and they do it for the right reasons, and that they give it their all. One of the things that I'm reminded of is that I like to, at the end of my life, I want to be able to say, hey, I put my talents and my gifts to their highest and best use, that I try to do the most good, and that I made a difference in the realm that I chose as my profession, which is the legal profession.
And you've practiced law in Lee County for quite a while.
It's been quite a number of years. It's been since 1988. After graduating from law school, and I can get into all that.
Yeah,
if you'd
sure.
like.
Where'd you go to law school?
Well, let me back up a little
Okay.
bit if you don't mind.
No,
so
go
people
right ahead.
get a little bit of a sense for who I am. I was born in Cuba, and my family fled communist Cuba when I was 5 years old in the late 60s. On my mother's side, we had a brother of hers, my uncle, who was a Methodist pastor in New Jersey, and he was our sponsor. Back then, you had to have a sponsor. We came through Liberty Towers, or Freedom Towers as you call them, in Miami, and got on a plane, a second plane, and got to New Jersey. I grew up in a small town in central New Jersey near the shore called Keyport, New Jersey, and went to public school there, elementary school, high school. I met my wife in high school, so if there's anyone who really knows me, it would be my wife, since we go back that long. After high school, I went to Seton Hall University. I attended Seton Hall University, which is a private Catholic institution in New Jersey. I had intended on not only finishing Seton Hall as far as college is concerned, but also law school. But Seton Hall Law School put me on a waiting list. Caused me to panic. I started applying around. Syracuse Law School was very gracious to offer me a conditional offer. They looked at my application. They said, you know, you don't perhaps fit the traditional criteria that we look at, but there's something about your essay, there's something about your background that we may want to take a chance on. And so they invited me to come and spend my $1,000 graduation money and a summer up in Syracuse, and I did that. I was successful through their summer program, and I was admitted unconditionally to their fall, and the rest is history. I graduated from Syracuse. I took my first position with the state attorney's office here in Fort Myers, actually here in the 20th Judicial Circuit. Yeah. And I was a prosecutor there from 1988 till 1990. In 1990, while I was a prosecutor, my wife got pregnant, and I saw the writing on the wall. I was not going to be able to afford to put the food on the table that I needed to, and pay all the other expenses on a prosecutor's salary. So I went into private practice with another assistant state attorney. We were partners for 5 years. So from roughly 1990 to 1995, I was in a partnership. In 1995, he and I split and went our separate ways, and I had been essentially a solo practice. I have had one occasion for about a period of 3 years or 2.5 years that I had an associate, but essentially a solo practitioner in downtown Fort Myers. So private practice in total is 22 years. Wow. That's a little bit of my background.
Who was your partner from 90 to
Ted
95?
Wolfendale. Ted Wolfendale was my partner, and we still keep in contact.
So you also have a degree in public administration?
I do. I have. When I was at Syracuse, not only did I take advantage of the great legal education program they had there, but a particular offer came in for a joint degree program, and I jumped on it. So I graduated with a master's in public administration, and from the Maxwell School, which I'm sure you're familiar, is one of the top 5. Actually, I think last year was #1 in the country, above Harvard and Yale and some others. A really fantastic public administration school.
How has that come into play as a practicing attorney, or has it?
It really has. I think I had notions of possibly getting into politics when I was young and naive. And the more I saw, the more I, understanding that I was about to begin our own family. It wasn't what I wanted for my family at the time. And so I became a little disenchanted with the politics. I've never really been a political person. I consider that one of my weaknesses. but also one of my strengths, because I believe that it allows me to be independent and not tied necessarily. But I hope to use those skills that I learned many, many years ago, perhaps in becoming a more efficient judge on the bench.
What types of law in private practice, what sorts of cases have you specialized in, if any?
I don't specialize. We have to be careful with those terms with the Florida Bar, but I have a high concentration of criminal cases. So I'd say 80–85% of my work is criminal. When I left the state attorney's office, that's all that I knew. But since then, I kind of learned and grew as an attorney, and I practice also in family law, personal injury, general civil, landlord-tenant, wills, and things of that nature. So kind of a broad base with the other 20%, but the great majority is criminal law.
What is it important for the public and voters to know about this particular level of the court system? Circuit judge, what do people need to know about that?
Most people don't understand the legal system, and that's one of the things that drives me to want to be part of the judicial branch, and that is because I think judges have a responsibility not only to administer justice in a fair, impartial manner with a great deal of integrity and transparency, but I think the role that's been missed out a lot is the educational branch. And that is, judges need to understand that people still thirst for knowledge about the court system. They want to better understand the court system. When I was campaigning back in 2010, I know that you're aware that I've run twice for judicial office, and I'm getting closer to the prize, as I like to say it. But one of the things that was unique about the last time I ran in 2010 was that I did it by petition process. I didn't dig in my pocket and pay it out. It would have been easy to do that, but I had more time. And so what I did was I went out into the community and I had people, I presented people with my petition to get on the ballot. It saved me in the end approximately $5,600, but the amount of information that I gathered from people in interacting was, it was priceless. There were common themes there that I learned. And one was they had a distaste for the trial system, the legal process. Part of that distaste came because they felt that they didn't like the Judge Judy judges. They think it's entertaining on TV, but it's not so entertaining when they're before judges. So they did not like that at all, and they felt there were too many Judge Judy types on the bench, that for some reason or another, perhaps they had taken on this robitis that we've spoken about before.
Yes.
But they also said that they want to feel welcome there. They want to understand the process there. And I think one of the most disappointing things that they found in the legal system was they, or a family member or a close friend, had an encounter with the legal system. They would go in and they would leave very dissatisfied, not just because perhaps the result, but because they didn't understand how did it all happen? What just happened? They left, befuddled and confused as to what had just happened. And it's important for the judge, to the extent that he can, without showing favoritism, is for the judge to explain what happened, to be an educator of sorts in rendering his sentence. So perhaps people can have a little bit of a guardrail there for the next time something happens, either similarly or that they can act to avoid court altogether. And I think we've abandoned, I think that as a system, not any particular judge, but I think we've abandoned that function of an educational type of leader in the courtroom.
Those bad experiences don't even have to be, if you're accused of something, it can even be something as simple as jury duty.
It certainly can.
So what's going on, and am I getting jerked around? And
yeah, well, here's another part.
Just tell people what's going on.
Yeah, not only that, Jeff, but also I want you to know that people really do value their time. They understand that, it's part of their civic duty coming to the, whether they're being called as a juror, perhaps a witness, or even a litigant. They value their time, but they don't feel as if their time is valued when they get there. The way the scheduling occurs, I think, can be greatly improved so that people are in the courtroom less. People don't need to be in the courtroom for hours. Attorneys don't need to be in the courtroom for hours, because guess what? If that attorney is in the courtroom for hours, somebody's paying for that.
Yeah.
And usually it's their client or the system as a whole. So I think that we can be more efficient, and I think that's one of the things that I would strive for, is for the trial time to be more efficient. We can get a lot done, but we don't need to have everybody there at the same time.
You left Cuba at a young age.
Yes.
Are you fluent in Spanish?
I am fluent in Spanish, and I have returned to Cuba on 3 separate occasions. It took me 35 years to return for the first time. I call it my 35-35 trip without spending a whole lot of time, because it took me 35 years from the moment that I came to the United States, who I consider to be the greatest land on the face of the earth, and to go back. And when the wheels took off of Miami, it's a religious trip, so it's a religious visa. We don't have to go through a third country. To the time the wheels touched down in Havana, it was 35 minutes, and I just found that amazing. Well, literally less than an hour apart, but in terms of the different environments, it's just completely night and day.
Oh,
Get a chance to look at the court system over there?
No, I did not. I spent most of my time with our church family. We are sistered up through the Methodist Church with a sister church in the mountains, so I didn't really get to see the judicial system there, but saw a lot of the political system and the overall system.
I bet you the judicial system is real simple.
It is, and it is quite different than ours. I think the presumption is different.
Yeah, for starters. I think where they put you while you're awaiting your trial or after your trial would be
If you want to call it
different.
that, Jeff, you're being kind.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes it's not that at all.
Being fluent in Spanish.
Yes, sir.
Would that be a help to someone on the bench in Southwest Florida?
I think that's a tremendous help, although we have...
Maybe not so much on the bench, but to the...
It's been a tremendous asset to me. I'm so thankful that my parents required that when I came home from school, Spanish was spoken in the home. And I didn't understand it at the time, but they were preparing me for life, and they wanted me not to lose those traditions and that culture. I think it's been tremendously helpful to me from an advantageous standpoint to be able to relate to clients directly, to market myself and things of that nature. In the courtroom, not so much. It still is advantageous because I don't have to wait for the interpreter to interpret everything. I can follow along as it goes. But I think it's part of my background. It's part of the uniqueness that I think that I would bring to the bench. Perhaps an aspect that isn't present there.
You'll be succeeding Frank Baker. What is the legacy that he leaves? What has he built?
I think Judge Baker is a very honorable person. I think he's always approached things from a very down-to-earth approach. And I think that is just a gift that you can't just assume that someone who takes on that position is going to have. So one of the things that I admire him the most, especially when he took the bench, was his approach in juvenile cases. I think you have to understand the human condition in order to be able to reach people at where they're at. And I think he had a very unique way of doing that in juvenile court. Obviously, he's taken it on beyond that in his other capacity, as he's been reassigned to other divisions. But I think one of the things he brings is that genuineness about it. And he approaches it from that standpoint. I think people appreciate that. Both people with lawyers and lawyers themselves, people without lawyers.
He seems to have an endless patience.
He does. And you have to have that.
But it must be so hard to do whenever you see people at their worst over and over and over again, and he just seems resilient beyond words.
I think that it's instincts. Part of it, obviously, you have to develop certain skills, but part of it is instincts, and you can't teach that. There is a portion of you that can become a better listener, a portion of you that perhaps through life experiences or perhaps mistakes you can become a more wise person. But there's a certain amount of instincts about this, common sense, that is just so important to this. And you also, one of the things I admire about him too, and excuse me for going back to it, is he doesn't take himself too seriously. He's got a great sense of humor, and I think he's a model. He's a model judge.
You note on your resume that you're were a member and past chair of the 20th Judicial Circuit Grievance Committee.
Yes, sir.
What does a grievance committee?
Unfortunately, lawyers, as you can imagine, do get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And clients place complaints against their lawyers, and there has to be a process in order for us to be transparent, in order for us to be reputable, in order for us to have credibility. There has to be a system that reins in those lawyers that are not doing the right thing. My experience there I consider to be invaluable. I learned a great deal about what other lawyers were doing and perhaps what they shouldn't be doing. I learned how the process treats lawyers. And I think the process is very transparent and very fair. So one of the things that I was able to do is I was a member for a period, and then I was asked to be the chair, and I accepted that role.
How does it work?
Yeah.
Someone
you
will
actually have testimony, and how do you weigh the evidence, or do you weigh evidence?
You can, and the process generally starts with a complaint being filed with Florida Bar. Usually that will go to Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
And in Tampa, they have an office designed for this process, and depending upon what part of the state the lawyer is located in, or he or she is located in, they will assign it to that particular circuit grievance committee. When we get that in, we also have an attorney from the bar who represents the bar and is able to advise us on some of the rule infractions and some of the significance of the rule infractions. But what that attorney does is it stands by us in a supervisory capacity while the committee itself decides the fate of that lawyer, whether there's enough evidence to move to the next level, which is to formally charge that lawyer with misconduct. Now, there can still be recommended sanctions through there. It could be agreed upon sanctions or otherwise. But there is a process there, and each of the committee members will likely have one or two cases at any given time. Then they bring, after they studied, investigated, interviewed the individuals, they'll bring the matter back to the committee, and they'll lay it on the line for the committee, inform the other members about what they've learned, about what their concerns are, about some of the recommendations. The committee will then decide whether it's something that can be summarily disposed of, or it needs further evidence and further a more formal hearing. And it'll invite that lawyer in. Perhaps it'll invite the alleged victim or the alleged complainant in, so that they have an opportunity to have their say. Because not everything is written on paper, and not everything that's written on paper is understood.
So this is an appointment by the Bar Association?
This is an appointment by the Florida Bar, yeah.
Okay. And when at various times when attorneys in Florida are reprimanded in some way, it seems to me usually it's like the Supreme Court.
That's the next level. So
Okay.
if we find enough evidence, it goes to the next level where they're formally charged, and the attorney that sat there as our supervisor is usually acting in the capacity of like a prosecutor.
How much of a time commitment is this when you're on the committee?
I think it's once a
Looks like you're
month.
on-
It was once a month when I was on there. I don't believe it's any more than
Okay.
that. There will be occasions where we're having a special proceedings and we're having evidence being presented. We'll have a court reporter there, and everything is formally transcribed and maintained. That'll take a half day, a whole day. So, but generally speaking, it's one time a month.
How about the Traffic Court Rules Committee?
All the committees that I've been on, the traffic court rules, the small claims rules, the unlicensed practice of law, the professionalism, all these committees have made me a better lawyer, number one, and have given me a unique insight. These committees are dedicated to particular issues within our profession.
What does the Traffic Court Rules Committee?
What they do is they look at rules and they say, is there something,
The
is there
statutes or the rules of the court?
traffic rules of the court?
Okay.
They will look at the rules of the court and they say, is there a trend out there that is making some of the implementation of the rules difficult or no longer feasible? Is there something that's happening, whether it's technology or some other case ruling, that is going to require us to relook at the rules, tweak them, make sure that they say what they mean, make sure that they're clear, make sure that if there's any type of confusion that it gets clarified. So I think what the Traffic Rules Committee does, whether that's small claims or whether that's traffic, it advises the Supreme Court and the Florida Bar about where we believe changes should be made.
For example, red light cameras?
No, that's red light camera. No, it's more of the procedure.
Yeah,
It's
that
more
goes
of
to statute.
Yes, sir.
So-
Yes, and again, with regards to statutes, my position is Judges should not be legislating from the bench. They can't be judicial cowards, Jeff. In other words, you can't abdicate your judicial responsibility. And if that means that you have to look at something and with critical eyes, you have to look at it with critical eyes. You first have to look at what the legislature intended.
Yes.
And you have to look at the plain meaning of the, but sometimes you'll have a case that's so unique that it may not fit. It may not fit that peg. And so you have to look at it and you have to make it tough decisions. And part of that decision may be, and again, I don't think it's so much for trial judges. I think that's more at the appellate level. Judges have to understand they have a rule and they have a responsibility to take care of business and compare everything and judge everything by the Constitution. The Constitution is always supreme.
What does judicial coward mean? I've never heard that.
I think that's a judge that is afraid to make a ruling. They have become so afraid to making a ruling because people keep saying, well, judges need to abide by the rule of law. Absolutely. But so strictly that they're afraid to move out of the confines when they have and they are presented with a unique position that they kind of throw up their hands and say, I don't know what to do with this. I think they have to make the best of it. They have to do their research. They have to find a way to try to uphold that law. But if that law doesn't apply, they have to be able to say, that law doesn't apply. And we have judges that are afraid to sometimes make a ruling on certain motions. I'm not going to name any names, but I think over 24 years, I think you can get the hint. There are some judges that are shy when it comes to making decisions, and we can't be shy. We are leaders in the courtroom.
Is there an occasion when a circuit judge would say that law is unconstitutional? Like that, you said it normally would go to an appeals court,
Yes.
but is it a
My
situation?
hope is that that would be rare.
Right. But it could happen.
It could happen.
List a lot of memberships, a lot of committees, Kiwanis, Edison Festival Lights, a number of them. A, how do you find the time now? And B, would you be able to find the time if you're a judge?
I owe it to my wife and my family. They've allowed me a great deal of leeway and flexibility. I have 3 daughters, all in college. One just graduated from UF and with honors, and we're very proud of her as well as the others. And she's going on to law school, and I've got to make sure that I'm home and to be that influence as well, together with my wife. I think I owe it to my family because they've allowed me that flexibility to get out into the community. I've always believed that in order to understand the pulse of the community and better understand the needs of our community, you have to be out there. I often don't understand why judges are invisible at times in the community. Some of them do make a genuine effort. Actually, many of them make a genuine effort to be involved in charitable things. And I think that this is another instance where I would hope, to the extent that time would permit and that it does not interfere in any way with my responsibilities as a trial judge, that I would still be able to do as much as I could. Because people have to understand that judges, we're people. We put on the pants the same way as somebody else, and we care about our community. We shouldn't just be in an ivory tower.
You probably would have to be sensitive to anything that could be perceived as fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
That probably would be.
No, that's
tough.
absolutely true. But that's why I say to the extent that it doesn't interfere, and to the extent that it's within the canons.
I'm just curious, a point again on your resume, that you were admitted to the New Jersey bar in 1989, and prior to that, the Florida bar. So you were in Florida, then you went back to New Jersey, and then you came back to Florida. What was
Well,
that?
I didn't leave. I only left to take the test.
Okay.
Please understand that at the time I had just moved to Florida. And my family, that's my side of the family and my wife's side of the family, was back in New Jersey.
Gotcha.
And there was always that plan B if things don't work out here in Florida,
Yep.
and thank goodness they have, that we would need to have a plan B. That was my plan B.
How'd you get interested in Lee County? Why Lee County?
Yeah.
Great
Or the
question.
circuit?
I looked around when I was thinking about applying. I already had a job in New Jersey.
Yeah.
I had already interviewed and had a job 15 minutes from where I grew up. But the more I thought about it, the more I was going to be in a law library, writing briefs, and carrying somebody's bags around. And although that's not a bad thing, it wasn't what I wanted to do. I love the courtroom. From the moment I went to law school, even before law school, I had a genuine love. Perry Mason and all the other shows that kids don't know these days, but that involve, you know, the courtroom.
There's a Perry Mason marathon on
Was there?
Monday. No, this coming Monday. I saw it last night.
But I love the courtroom. My internships were with the prosecutor's office in New Jersey, the prosecutor's office in New York, the attorney general's office in New York. I love the courtroom. I love that setting. And the more I thought about it, even though it was going to be a decent paying job, I said, you know, I want to be in the courtroom, and I wanted to be a prosecutor. In New Jersey, you had to already be an admitted lawyer before you even applied to the district attorney's office. So bottom line was, I was looking at other options. Make a long story short, I convinced my wife that we needed to go to Florida. I had heard a lot of good things about Florida. The East Coast was already densely populated with lawyers and even Hispanic lawyers, and I saw the West Coast as an opportunity. My first interview was in Fort Myers. I had a great interview, probably one of the best ones I've ever had. I loved it there. I looked at homes. They were at that time $50,000, brand new, 3-2 bed, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in Cape Coral. My wife could possibly go and finish her education. We could live on a prosecutor's salary. It just seemed like the dream job. I wouldn't be able to do that in New Jersey. So, to make a long story short, I did go ahead and make the decision. I was offered a position here in the Fort Myers State Attorney's Office. Took that, and as a fallback, I did take the New Jersey bar while everything was fresh in my mind, and that I could still, you know, pass the bar in another state. I did.
You recall who interviewed you?
Randy, my brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
He's still with the state, by the way.
Yeah. Is there anything that's important about this particular facet of the judicial system that's important that we haven't asked you about that the voters and the public should understand?
That they get a chance to elect their judicial leaders. I know that there's been that debate, you know, should judges, trial judges I'm talking about here, should trial judges be appointed, should they be elected? I think it's more democratic if they're elected. And I think it keeps them humble. You know, when you're out there and you're having to interact with people that perhaps don't necessarily favor you, and you don't have a robe on and you're not in a courtroom, you're just the same as them, which is the way it is, and you listen to them and you hear some of the criticisms that you hear, and you have to wave and do these things to get their attention, just for them to notice you, because we are, no matter what anyone says, we are the low profile race. And just to get their attention, it's very disappointing when people, even people that turned out, this is a unique aspect of the last election, about 20% of the people who voted in the last election actually voted, skipped our judicial race.
They didn't even vote at all.
That was awful. And I thought, you know, we have to do more to better promote not only judicial candidates but these races, because what they do is they put us at the bottom of the retention races. And because they don't really know a whole lot about the retention appellate and Supreme Court judges, they skip that section altogether. And that's unfair. That's unfortunate.
How do you campaign for such a position?
You try to go to as many places as you possibly can. You try to shake as many hands as you can. You try to get anyone to listen to you about why you should be given their vote. You have to try. You try to promote yourself. Try to get people to understand this is an important position. It's not something that should be left to chance. And I think it's very democratic.
So you have 10 weeks in a large circuit.
Yes.
Knock on doors,
No.
go to shopping centers.
I think you do a fair amount of knocking on doors in a county judge race, in a circuit race, with a short window. I think it's impossible. What you do is you have your committee raise as much money as they can for you, and you try to reach them either through direct mail, TV, or otherwise signs. You know, try to get their attention.
So in Collier County, I see Donald Day's name here.
We have a good representation of some Collier County attorneys on there, yes. Donald Day, Jeff Quinn, Dominic Lucarelli, Jose Lago, some others on there. There's some good people, and we tried to build a broad base committee.
I see you're a member of the Edison State College President Search Committee.
How
did that go?
My function there, it was an extraordinary opportunity. We had some well-qualified applicants. We started out with 40.
Yeah.
Then we only decided to interview about 9 of them. We ultimately wound up, after doing all the interviews and voting on them, and Dudley Gilda is doing an incredible job there, by the way.
I was going to ask you about that.
He's doing an incredible job. We wound up recommending 5 for the Board of Trustees to interview. Since then, 2 have dropped out, so we're down to 3. But I feel very comfortable that any one of those 3 would make a fantastic president for Edison State College. So it was great. It was similar to the experience that I had when I was on the search committee for the Fort Myers Police Chief job. I was invited to be a part of that panel, as part of the citizens panel on that. And that was a unique and very rewarding experience.
We're out of time.
That's
Thank you.
I talked too much.
Thank you. No, you did great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.